Welcome to another fantastic episode of Small Business Celebration Meat and Potatoes Live. It's an episode where we dive deep into one particular topic with a former guest that we've had before on the main show of Small Business Celebration. And this week's guest is Douglas Carothers, partner of Personal Ag Management, where we're going to be talking about when being a general is not the thing to do. But before we get into that, we couldn't do this without our title sponsor, Oliver & Associates. At Oliver & Associates Real Estate, we know that buying or selling a home isn't just a transaction, it's a life moment. That's why they're committed to building relationships that last. They take the time to truly understand your needs, your dreams, your stories, so they can find you not just a house, but a home. Give Oliver & Associates a call at 661-808-3444 or check them out at yourrealtor.us today. Today's Meat and Potatoes Live episode location is brought to you by Modern Gigi Gallery, an ultra-modern art gallery located in downtown Bakersfield, California, featuring the artworks of the modern abstract artist Johnny Ramos. Whether you're looking for artwork for your office, your home, or a postcard that you can send as a thank you note, go to Modern Gigi Gallery, located at 900 18th Street in Bakersfield, or give them a call at 661-840-8729, or email them at art@moderngigi.com today. With Douglas Carothers, the partner with Personal Ag Management, who is insurance agent, conductor, composer, Rotarian. What else have I missed here?
Oh, I don't know. I think that pretty much covers it. That's a good list, at least. It already exhausted me.
Exactly. Well, are you the present, past president?
I'm the immediate past president of Bakersfield West Rotary, but I'm also the district governor-elect for all 6 of the Rotary clubs in Bakersfield for next year.
Wow.
So, just rolling right into the next thing.
Is this one of those situations where they keep promoting you to your least about competency? Is that what it is?
Probably, yeah.
But how did you get into the crop insurance business?
So crop insurance is a family business. My dad started it back in the late 80s, I believe, and at that time he was just doing risk consulting for farmers for federal disaster relief programs. About late 90s into 2000, we added crop insurance into that portfolio. It's really when crop insurance started to get good, honestly. Right. So it's kind of interesting because it's been around since the Dust Bowl, right, but it really hasn't been good until recently. It's just taken that long to kind of go.
And when you just say good, what does good mean?
Works for the farmer.
Okay, all right.
So it's interesting because still to this day, they'll come out with new programs. And
when you say they, it's a federally funded program.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, so this would be the Risk Management Agency, which is a sub-agency of the USDA. And so a new program will come out, and a lot of times the first year, it's either really great for farmers or really terrible for farmers.
Right, until they get the bugs worked out.
Yeah, you can tell which one it is based on how badly they cut, or you say, okay, maybe we need to do a little bit better here and whatnot.
Right.
So, there were programs in place mostly for row crops all the way up until the late 2000s. Specialty crops started to come in there, which is mostly what we grow in this area, the stuff that people eat.
And when you say specialty crops, you're not talking about corn, tomatoes, that sort of thing. What are specialty crops?
It's so weird. I hate that distinction because specialty, you would think I would even go even further. I'd be like dragon fruit or like a pluot or something.
Sure.
I mean, both of those are specialty crops,
right,
but specialty crops are literally just not the traditional row crops, which would be corn, soybean, cotton, wheat, barley, dry beans, those sorts of things. Anything that's grown in a row is a row crop. Specialty crops is pretty much anything else. So almonds, pistachios, table grapes, wine grapes. I mean, the stuff that we grow in California. I was going to say, you just described like 80% of everything we grow. It's literally here. California, yeah. We're the number 1 ag producing county in the country right now. As of, I think that they're always a lag year on that survey. So I think that was a 2023 survey because it was last year they were talking about this.
Right.
And all the stuff that we grow is a specialty crop.
Sure. And this all came about because of the Dust Bowl, when everything, the agriculture industry just got literally wiped out. And yes, that was a major event, but like you said, it's evolved over time. How is it different now versus when the program was first started?
So it all came out of an ad hoc system. So whenever farmers were experiencing a major disaster,
right.
Somebody from Congress would have to go, hey, my constituents are really hurting, and it's not their fault. It was an act of God, and we need to do something to shore up all this stuff. And so they kept doing that. And the thing about ad hoc spending is it goes crazy, right?
Right.
It's really easy to say, oh, we need $6 billion, and then they make sure and spend all that $6 billion. Versus crop insurance requires everybody to have skin in the game. From the farmer, they have to pay a premium. To the insurance provider, they have to assume some of that loss, and then the federal government at the end of the day, because you can't pool your risk because crops are all grown in the same area, when there's a devastating loss across a crop area, the federal government's the final backstop that says you're not going to go out. And I think Californians finally understand what that means after some recent fires down in the Palisades and Eaton Fire. Yeah.
You and your family started getting into this insurance business for a reason. Why was that?
My dad had knowledge, actually. So he was what's called a CED, and don't ask me to tell you what that acronym stands for.
Sure.
But governments love their acronyms. But he was basically the head of the FSA office. That's the Farm Service Agency office. That's the one that deals with all the ad hoc spending and government programs out of the USDA. So similar to RMA. I'm sorry for all the acronyms. The FSA, and at that time they were called ASCS.
Right.
So he had all this specialized knowledge in one, how the government worked, but also in how farmers worked. And so he realized that he could impart that knowledge better than the government could. And so he went off on his own and created his own business to help out farmers on those things, so that when they had problems, they didn't have to go sit in a government office and wait 3 or 4 hours to get stuff done. They could just say, hey, I grow cotton, and he would take care of it.
Visioneers, if you haven't watched this week's episode with Alan Kennedy, you're definitely going to want to, because Douglas's position is exactly the same position that Alan is putting his son into, which is your dad, when you came of age, you didn't have to go into the family business. In fact,
Right.
Your career took a totally different route. Very briefly, for Visionary Nation, you didn't go into the insurance business right out of college.
No. In fact, I probably wouldn't have even needed to go into college to do this particular type of work, although I still think it probably would have helped.
Right.
But no, I went to go study music, and I always knew that this was an avenue that I could go into, but it wasn't what I thought my passion was. But it's interesting because I had a conversation at one point with my mom, and we were talking about skills and what my actual skills were. And I told her it's just really intangible. My skill is leadership, but it's like, how do I manifest that? And I chose to do it through music. And so my goal was always to become a conductor. And so I went and studied and eventually got a master's degree in orchestral conducting. And really, I just, at this point, that is a degree in management. I've got 100 people on stage, and I can't do what they do, but I've got to get them to unify behind my vision.
Right.
And so that's where I've always kind of been effective as a person, is in that leadership role, which is also really hard when you're coming out of college and you're looking for a new role, to be like, I should be running this place.
Sure, yeah. Well, but you've taken that role into the family business, and that is where we get into the crux, the meat and potatoes of our conversation today, which is, conveniently, when being a general is not the thing to do. Because when you came into the family business, I can just imagine what the other employees thought when you came in. It's like, oh great, the owner's kid is coming in to boss me around and tell me what to do. What was that like, and how did you win them over?
It's a good question, and I think I actually hopefully learned some of those lessons even before I came on, because it took me a really long time. I was almost in my 40s by the time I came on to the family business. Got some life experience elsewhere. But so I always thought, and I think this is common for new leaders, I always thought, I don't want to be like any of the bosses. I saw that the way that they did, and they never got anything done. So when I become a boss, I'm gonna go in and get things done. And so I did, and I just just, I trampled all over people. I was like, you're going to do it this way, and we're going to like it, and we're all going to go on board with it.
You see the tire marks on the back ends of, okay.
And so at this point, I was my college job. I'd worked for Starbucks. I worked for Starbucks for 14 years because it just kind of went with me everywhere.
Right.
And so the interesting thing about my role when I stepped into management there was I also had the gravitas. I'd been around, so nobody could really argue with me either. They knew that I had all the skills that they thought they had. Right. And so when I said something, they were like, oh, well, I guess we kind of have to listen to him, which just added to that resentment. So not only am I telling them what to do, I'm not really listening to them. And then on top of that, I can outperform them. So then they feel like they really have no rebuttal possibilities to step in and say, well, maybe that doesn't work. Or maybe, have you considered trying this? And
so how did you get the 2x4 across the eyes moment that said, okay, I have to change my ways?
Yeah, it's part of Starbucks' culture. I think it was by trial and error ultimately. Like, I realized that you go in, you start burning bridges, you start pushing people, and they get resentful and they get really unhappy, and so then you turn over your whole staff. Right? And that's not good for anybody because it takes time and costs money to train all those people and get them in. And it's better if you can get them on board from the get-go. And so I softened my stance over time as I learned that, hey, this isn't really working. And ultimately what I realized is that the best way, or when I was the most effective leader, is when I stopped myself and I said a whole lot less and just spent that time just listening and hearing what they had to say and then making adjustments from there and said, well, have you considered this way or have you gone in here? And so coming into the family business, to link back to that, I already had developed some of those skills, and I knew that one, my dad wasn't going anywhere, right? So I wasn't going to get to be leader. I was actually lowest man on the totem pole, but still my skill set is really leadership. So I have to sit back, and I am more in an advisory role. I just listen, I hear, I take notes, and maybe not physically, but mentally notes on what's going on and what's working. And then when I think that there's an opportunity for me to make an adjustment to somebody's way of thinking, then I interject in that way.
How did it feel to go from being a general in a Starbucks to being a second lieutenant in the family business?
It's hard. It's humiliating, or not humiliating, it's humbling. It takes a moment of stepping back and stepping outside of yourself and realizing that life is not a straight line. There's multiple curveballs that are going to get thrown in your way. And I had learned this multiple times, because after I stopped working at Starbucks, I started to throw harder into my music credentials and tried to go into there. And I couldn't find a lot of leeway into there because they go, oh, well, you've got professional experience, but it's in this other thing. And, you haven't worked in music in a really long time. And I was like, yeah, but these things translate. They're not universally in a vacuum by themselves. They don't. Right. So I had to take a step back and just enjoy that ride and humble myself and allow myself to be in those positions. So I think that also helped when I got into the role of being a second lieutenant again, where I could just kind of step back and allow the things that were happening to me to happen, and then again figure out where are my ways. It doesn't mean that I'm not a leader still. I think a lot of people in the office look at me in a leadership role. We've had some interesting, interpersonal things come up here and there, as always happens in business, and I may not have been the one making the decisions, but I was part of the people in the room who could say, maybe that's not the best idea, or that might get us in trouble in this way.
Well, you may not be the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. That's your dad.
Yeah, exactly.
But you are now that person that the business and others send to Washington, D.C. to help form policy when it comes to crop insurance. This is no small feat on your part, because you've grown from being second lieutenant, and I don't know where that puts you in the military structure.
Communications director, I think.
exactly. Because now you definitely have at least one star in your shoulder. As far as that goes. So you've had to develop, you've had to grow, and for visionaries who are trying to apply this to their business, what is that one thing that you've learned the hard way that a lot of business owners could take home and say, I need to apply this so that I'm not the general, but I'm the leader that my team needs me to be?
Yeah, I think the most important skill that, whether you're a leader, second command, or even just a worker, somebody who's carrying out the executed orders, is to step back and just listen. Listen to what's being said. Take yourself out of it. Don't have a bunch of feelings wrapped up into it, which is hard in a family business.
Right.
And I know you were talking to one of those earlier today, and so I empathize with them, because it's especially hard, because you don't just get to take the family stuff and put it in a box for 8 hours a day and then take it back out again later.
Right.
It gets all kind of intertwined in there. But yeah, so going and doing the lobbying is really interesting, because these are congressional leaders. These, look at Vince Fong. He was elected by the people of Kern County. David Valadeo too, partially Kern, Tulare, and Kings. He's got a much more harder district in a way.
Right.
But I'm able to go and hold court with them in their offices in DC and talk about the problems that face their constituency from my perspective and the way that I see it, and how that they can help or hurt depending on what they're doing or depending on what way Congress is going. And I don't just meet with our local people, we meet with nationwide. So it's all about the crop industry. We meet with both sides of the aisle, both Democrat and Republican. And we also try to meet with not just rural members, but also the urban members too, because all of us, it's the last place in government where there's still bipartisan support for this farm bill thing that needs to get written right now. We're kind of sitting on some extensions. Yeah. So
the thing that a lot of business owners say, and you alluded a little bit to this earlier, is don't get too wrapped up and personal in this decision that you make when you're working with your employees. At what point, as the business owner, as the business leader, do you have to be able to take a look at a situation and realize the problem isn't them, the problem is me?
Oh my God. Okay, so
yeah, I say the easy ones for the end.
no, so this is great actually, because I think that the place where I realized this was back in my conducting days. And so conducting as a metaphor for leadership is so interesting, because again, I kind of laid it out in the best way that I could. You get 100 people on stage, they're all the masters of their craft. You can't literally play 100 instruments to make a live concert go at any given time. You need them to unify behind you. And so sometimes when I was conducting, I would do something, and I would give a cue or something, and it would just wreck everything, right? They would fall apart. And so often you see, especially young conductors or brash, arrogant conductors would come out and yell at, maybe it was the tubas. Tubas, you missed your cue. I gave it, I pointed right at you, I looked right at you. What's your problem? And more and more I realize as those happen, when the orchestra is falling apart, it's not their problem. They're not the one that made the error. It was me. I neglected something. Maybe I was looking over here, but that wasn't the most important cue that I was supposed to give. The cue that I needed to give, or the people that needed my support, were over here on this side of the stage.
It's all because the tuba players were listening to the cellos, who were listening to the oboe when they needed to come in because they were following the leader.
And the reality of the situation is that it's always the first violin that controls the entire orchestra, and the conductor is just the guy that gets paid for it. Sorry, still in.
Well, that brings us to the fortune cookie game. Now, Visioneers, if you're not familiar with the way the fortune cookie game works, I've got a sealed, wrapped fortune cookie in my hands. I have no idea what the fortune inside the cookie is, but more importantly, neither does Douglas. And Douglas has to take this fortune cookie, unseal it, break open the fortune, read the fortune inside, and add "in my business" at the end of it, and expound on the idea. Take it away. What does the fortune say?
Okay, let's see. Soon you will get the recognition you deserve in my business.
Okay, there sounds like a novelette in there. What recognition are you looking for?
I don't know that I'm not looking for any recognition in my business, but I will say, because I know that there's many sons and daughters of parents who have started businesses who are now working at their family's businesses, and I will say to them that the recognition that you're looking for is the fact that you're there. Your parents clearly had some amount of ability to believe in who you were as a person and that you could execute whatever role that they've asked you to be into. And those days are going to be frustrating and hard, and you're going to look inside yourself and say, I could be doing anything else. I could be doing this somewhere else and maybe get the recognition that I deserve, but that the grass is always greener on the other side of the street. And I think your parents have supreme confidence in you, not just as sons and daughters, but as business people too. So keep that in mind. That's what I would take from this.
Visioneers, if you've watched the main show for some time, over the last year or so, you've probably noticed an uptick in the quality of the questions. And that is because very quietly in the background is producer Emily. And producer Emily, she is 180 degrees opposite of me in so many different ways. And she comes up with questions that there's been many an episode where I have just cut my questions out and put hers in there. That brilliant. And of course, Visioneer Nation, and because of it, has grown by more than 1,000% because of this fine young lady. So please let me go ahead and trade seats with one and only producer Emily.
And Questions by Emily is sponsored by Carothers Consulting Group. Hunting for top-tier talent for your business? Look no further than Carothers Consulting Group. Their mission is to deliver world-class staffing and direct hire services by truly listening to your needs. At Carothers Consulting, it's not just about filling positions, it's about creating a culture of mutual success for both candidates and clients. With unmatched customer service and a commitment to earning your trust, they're redefining the staffing industry one placement at a time. Ready to experience the future of staffing? Visit CarothersConsultingGroup.com or call them at 877-800-4622. That's CarothersConsultingGroup.com or 877-800-4622. And let's build your legacy together.
Hello Visioneers, I'm Emily and I've got questions, and if you've got questions, feel free, drop them in the chat. I will be monitoring it up until the very end. So we'll get into the questions. So first off, and I would be remiss if I didn't ask, you worked at Starbucks for 14 years.
Yeah.
You still drink Starbucks?
I do. I do.
What is your favorite drink from a professional?
So it's funny, when you start working at Starbucks for the very first time, you start with a very large, very sugary drink, and then as you go through, and I think this is probably true of like any barista, it gets smaller and smaller and smaller, and the coffee gets stronger and stronger and stronger, and the sugar. So now I just drink a Quad Grande Black Americano, hot
Quad
usually.
Grande?
Yeah. So
Does that last you the whole day, or is that just the morning drink?
I might drink one or two of those actually. So, and then sometimes I have like a tea or a nitro cold brew in the middle of the day. So.
Wow.
Yeah, but it's just pure black coffee or black tea at this point.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
That's funny. I just had to get that question out of
Yeah.
before everyone, came at me for not asking. I actually have a strange question to ask you, because I've noticed this in leaders, and I want you maybe verify whether or not you think it's correct. But I've been told I tend to have a stronger personality, but that I think fast. And that sometimes maybe leadership, it comes across as a biting comment, or maybe somebody could get easily offended because a leader is someone that just thinks really quickly. And I'm sure working in music composition, you have to be able to think kind of quickly. Do you notice this? Do you notice that part of your ability to be a good leader comes from just a brain that's always moving?
So it's interesting. That's a fantastic question. So one, yeah, I absolutely have that ability too. And sometimes it serves me well, and sometimes it doesn't. It's sort of like humor, right? When you have a quick wit and you can answer something quickly, then people tend to go, oh, that person is interesting, or they're smart, and it shows their intelligence. But actually, and I encourage you, if you haven't ever read it, Danny Kahneman's Thinking Fast and Slow, I think the best leaders are actually the people who have that ability to think fast, but can turn that off and go into their slow thinking area. Because sometimes just because you have a thought and it's a gut reaction, and it is maybe 90% of the way there, that 10% of nuance and stopping and having that slow down and that realization moment to think about what you're fully doing might make all the difference in how what you want to convey gets conveyed and then carried out by your people.
How have you seen this show up in your life as you transitioned from composition to being in the family business to now being more of a leader in the business? What does that look like for you, learning to slow down?
Yeah, so I think that's kind of been the arc of my whole story. So when I first got into being management at Starbucks, it was definitely that fist, no, that's not the way that you're supposed to do that, go and do it this way. And it was sort of no questions asked. In fact, to put myself on blast and make a really harsh statement, there was one time when I was in New York and there was a girl who'd worked for Starbucks for a very long time. She's a very intelligent girl. Who came to ask me how to make one of the ingredients that is supposed to get made. And I said, well, I think you can figure it out by yourself. I was clearly in a fast mode. And she goes, but I don't know how. Nobody's ever told me how. And I bitingly, to your point, turned back to her and I said, well, do you know how to read? The instructions are on the bag. And I was very, when I say I was a general, I was a general. And that was not a way to convey that message at all.
To get kudos?
No. So it stuck out in my head. Yeah, for sure. And then later on as a manager, when I was working with another manager who was struggling because she felt like she couldn't get the right amount of staff. And the district leadership was really coming down hard on how do you improve your time and your numbers. There was a time when I was able to go into their store and I said, let's just sit back and watch your morning. And we didn't do anything. We didn't say anything. We just sat and watched. And as she went to go, well, I think I should say something to this person, I said, no, let's just sit back and watch. And so getting that and then sitting down and having a debriefing and watching the entire 2 hours really led to realize, I said, your people, whether you realize or not, you can give them all the instruction you want, but they're working 120, 150%. They're giving you more than what they should have to give you. And what that tells me is that you don't have enough people on. And so now let's go back and look and reallocate your scheduling time to get more people on during this part of your day versus another part of your day. And that kind of goes to what Michael was asking me about earlier, where it's like, is it your fault? Or should we kind of look inward at what we were doing? And that was definitely one of those moments where it was like the manager was making the mistake in that case and asking maybe too much of her staff and didn't even realize it, right?
And that's when slowing down and taking a step back and just observing can be really helpful in your business.
100%.
Yeah. What about, so you obviously had a big career shift. What do you give, because there are a lot of people watching our show that either want to change careers or they want to start their own business, and it might be in an entirely different field than they came from. They could be an educator and they want to become a marketing firm. What advice do you give to someone that would help them slow down and tangibly think about, is this really a good next step for me? What was it kind of that you had to ask yourself?
That was, for me personally, that's a really hard step because being a musician was not just a job. It was indoctrinated into who I was.
It's a lifestyle.
It was very much, I'm Douglas and I'm a conductor composer. It's like, is as fluent as my name. And so it's more than just, in my case, it was more than just a career shift. It was being able to let go of those pieces of me. And that's really hard. What I will say about people who are experiencing or looking to transition into something new, I'd say if you're passionate about it, go for it. Just do it, because there's nothing. Michael and I were talking just before their show. There's no better trainer than life experience. You just have to get out there and work out all the bugs. I mean, this show is perfect. You guys have talked about how it's gotten better over time, right?
Anyone who's watched the live show,
Yeah.
any amount of time has seen that this episode is going far better than the rest.
Yeah, exactly. And so the only thing that you can do is get out there and do it. And I think if you're passionate about it, then go and do it and just make that leap.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then getting into lobbying, how did you get into that in the first place? And I know you might have talked about that in your episode a few years back, but for those that didn't watch that episode yet, because I'm sure they still have time, it's still up, how did you get into that shift? Because that's even very different. That's from working in the family business to saying, oh, there's so many more people that I need to help, and this is how I'm going to do it.
Yeah, it's super interesting. So our business had been doing it for a while. So my dad had started doing that piece of it. But he is somebody who, while he is very charismatic and get out there and do that, it takes a lot out of him.
Yeah.
And so it made sense to transition that to somebody else. And he knew that I had these skill sets. Plus, when I was training music, I was over on the East Coast, and I think he, whether consciously or subconsciously, knew I'd appreciate like spending some time on the East Coast again.
Yeah.
And so he thought that it would fit within my skill set. And I'd really say that it's of all the things that I do in my job, it's the one that is closest fits to my skill set, because there's a bit of performance. There's a bit of, I've got to have a large knowledge base, but I have to be able to, kind of to your point, have that quick wit and be able to pivot. If we start talking about this thing over here, or a perfect example is the previous secretary of the Department of Agriculture had talked about one of her main priorities being specialty crops. Oh my gosh, as soon as I heard that, I was like, specialty crops is my bag. Let's talk about that. Let's figure out how we can make this better. If that's your priority, that's my priority. And just having those abilities to quickly pivot into those things, I think, are super important. But as for lobbying, and I think quick civics lessons here, lobbying is every American's right. To lobby literally came from the people who would wait in the White House's lobby to talk to the president as he was going in and out of the building. This was back when that was a much easier thing to do. There wasn't security. And so lobbyists are not just these evil lawyers that live in DC. I mean, there's some of those, but your ability to go talk to your congressperson, whether it's here in your district or in DC, is your American right, and you should exercise that right. So if you're happy or unhappy with whatever system is going on in your government, go and talk to your people. And our business is tied extremely close to what the government does. So that's why we kind of got involved with all of that.
So what would you say to the average American who's like, I've never thought about doing this, but I have opinions and I think that they should be shared? How'd you get into that?
Very first thing I would do is call your congressperson's local office. Talk to them whatever you're passionate about, whatever you think is important to you. If your industry is affected by some regulation, do not be quiet. There's usually trade groups too. Get involved with your trade groups. Those can be kind of difficult sometimes to move up through the ranks. I had kind of a leg up because I just took over a spot that my dad had kind of occupied, and they took me under their wing. But absolutely, the more that you interface and the more that you know your congressperson, the more that they're going to talk to you. And they might even call you and ask your opinion on something. I've had that happen before and say, is this something that's going to work? Do you like this? Is this, because they have to have a knowledge that is an inch deep but a mile wide. They have to know a little about everything, because there's so much out there that is impacted by federal governments.
Well, I bet that inch probably is just enough to know who to talk to.
That's exactly right. Yeah, and they rely heavily, and their staff relies heavily on people like me who can go in there and say, oh, I can speak to this particular area, or I think this is how this is going to affect it. This is good, this is bad. And some of it can get really wonky, and maybe I'm not the best there, but maybe I'm better at the high level picture, and they need both. So if you've got that kind of knowledge, definitely.
Yeah. Well, did you grow up on a farm? Like, what was your introduction to agriculture?
So I grew up in Bakersfield. I did not grow up in a farm. My dad, we were always farm adjacent. So my dad, I remember when I was a kid, going out, driving out to a farm, and my brother and I would be shooting our BB guns on the farm while my dad would be out there actually measuring fields as part of what he was doing. And so I would say adjacent to, I didn't do much farming at all. I'm a city boy through and through, for sure, which is why I do well in DC. My brother's more of the farm guy. He did some cattle ranching and some FFA stuff.
So you didn't grow up on land, but you just were on the land. You saw how it worked.
Yeah.
You were around lots of different farms, I would imagine, which I'm sure has given you a good understanding of how that works. And what is it about this area specifically that is home to the biggest agriculture in the U.S.? I
think that's a good question. I think it's probably one, cheap land has to do with it, although I don't think anybody can say that it's cheap anymore. But at least at one point in time it was. Mm-hmm. This is a huge inland sea, the Central Valley, that dried up many, many years ago. So for the longest time there was tons of nutrients and water underneath the surface that was available. And we've got this wonderful Mediterranean climate that can grow almost anything. So if you think about like some of our key crops in the area being pistachios are actually a Mediterranean crop that were primarily grown in the Middle East, and now we are the #1 pistachio producer in the entire world. Iran is the other pistachio place, but they don't produce you've never eaten an Iranian pistachio unless you've eaten a bright red pistachio from like
maybe
the 50s or 60s.
Date,
yeah. Yeah. And we grow those. Actually, those grow down in like Palm Springs. Yeah. So.
Well, very last thing, because I saw it come through on the chat, and then we'll wrap up.
Sure.
Because I'm getting the notes over here from the director. But Robert asks, as a hard-driving leader, do you struggle to make time for relationships?
Oh God, we don't have enough time to answer that question.
I know we don't have time.
Actually, so.
You do a lot.
I do a lot, and I got really involved with Rotary, and that was a big piece of my life for a long time. I've never been married. I am 42, turning 43. I am actually now engaged, but I would say that with that stuff, join your groups, join the Chamber of Commerce, join a Rotary Club, join a Lions Club, Kiwanis. Make those connections with people in the community, because whether it comes directly out of that or indirectly, you will meet people, you will find the person who's out there. It's been hard to find that, especially in Bakersfield. Let's face it, Bakersfield's for married people. It's not for single people.
It's very true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anybody who's tried to date here knows that.
Well, last but not least, if visionaries want to find you, how can they get in touch with you? What are some ways?
Yeah, so I think the easiest way, especially if you're trying to connect with me for personal ag management, is through our website, www.personalagmanagement.com. I know it's a lot to spell out, but it's just like what it sounds. You can also email me, Douglas@PAM Insurance. That's PAM, personalagmanagementinsurance.com. You can also call our office, 661-831-4676.
Well, thank you, Douglas. It has been wonderful. And Visionaires, if you want to see more of what we've done this week, we had Alan Kennedy with Quality Team Home Care on, talking about why you definitely need HR and why you should not push your children into the family business, but they might just join alongside you. And with that, thank you for being here, and join us next time on